the one thing that you wish you could get the answer to that, and that it would be like a massive tick on your tick box as a media?
I think frustrating is actually the right word to use, but like the one thing that I can't really get to is performance of the funds. I wish like everybody had their performance wide open to everyone else. Think about it, like if you're an LP, it's very rarely that you can come up with like a table that has all of the list of the funds with their performance across the different vintages and how it evolves over time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this new episode of Fundraising Insider podcast, the podcast where we put what happens behind the check and we put it inside the deck. Today, yet again, we are not just going to look at what's hiding behind the check, but we're going to have a bit of a special episode. Today, I'm really glad to have Hugo as our guest. Hugo, if you don't know him, you should know him, first of all. And if you are in the climate ecosystem, which is a little bit of a theme in our first coming episodes, you should know about him even more because he has a podcast called New Wave. That is one of the inspirations for this podcast, I can't lie. And he's been very active. And today's a bit of an episode to summarize his learnings. I believe you've been active for nearly 2 years now on that podcast. And yeah, just can't wait to hear about this. You're also an investor with Climate Club. You'll tell us more about it. But here is to see the two visions, the investor point of view, but also podcaster, the interviewer, the passionate guy point of view, your key learnings and the future of all of those adventures. So Hugo, thank you for joining us. Please introduce yourself. Who are you? Where you come from? What's your background? And what are the multiple hats that you wear?
Thank you for having me, Thibaut, first of all. And I'm really glad that New Wave kind of influenced the creation of your podcast as well. That's a bit of the mission. If we can get more people to talk about climate tech, then I'm very happy with the results. So look, I'm Hugo. I'm French, as you can hear from my accents. Grew up in the Southwest, had a bit of a beginning of my career at Microsoft for 5 years, and then worked for the Climate Innovation Fund, which is Microsoft CVC, for decarbonization of Microsoft activities. Got very anxious about the climate crisis, but also realized that technology was the only way out of this, or one of the way to get out of this climate crisis. And so decided to pursue a career as a venture capitalist to help early stage climate tech innovation come to life. But life's not that easy. So before getting there, I've actually created a media called New Wave to learn myself what a great climate tech investor should look like. Later expanded a bit more towards also interviewing entrepreneurs. And now the media has three main platforms. The first one is a podcast that we do every week with founders, entrepreneurs, investors from all sides, so LPs, VCs, angel investors as well, to try and understand how to build and finance early stage climate tech innovation. There's a newsletter that comes out every Monday, which is a summary of everything that happens in climate tech, so all of the fundraising round, all of the new funds that were created. And then there's a LinkedIn account where I'm just posting everything that comes to mind about climate tech, really just trying to be a bit of the hype man for climate tech, really. That's kind of what I'm trying to do. And yeah, that platform has grown into something that has more than 60,000 followers across platforms. As of January this year, I've actually joined Climate Club as an investor to close the loop and invest in early stage climate tech innovation at pre-seed and seed, which I think we'll talk a lot more about today.
Exactly. So usually we work in a sort of chronological order where we start from the start and we end at the end. Here, we might do things the other way around. Just for this first part, we're going to start with the investor bit. It seems like it's the accomplishment of everything you've been doing and a bit of a clin d'oeil, as we say in French, a wink to your past and your first activity with Microsoft. So can you tell us how you go from podcasts to investing? Because either it's something that's been in your blood since the start, which I believe it might have been, or it's just that you hear so much from cool companies, cool founders, cool investors, that you have this hype of, okay, I want to do it as well. But how do you join both ends?
Yeah, it takes a long time, I guess. I mean, it's not that easy, but for me, so when I left the Climate Innovation Fund at Microsoft, I knew I wanted to go back to being an investor. Okay. But before that, I had a bit of a period of time where I was still working for Microsoft in a different position. And I actually wanted to contribute to the climate tech ecosystem in a way that I could sustain it for a few months while working a full-time job. So that's how I created the media company, because I was like, okay, maybe I can do an interview a week. That will take me 5 to 10 hours a week. I can do that nights and weekend, and that's going to work out. So started doing this, but I had already in mind the idea that I wanted to go back to being an investor. And as the media grew, I started talking to a lot more VCs and people that I find inspiring and people I wanted to work with and work for. And so I kind of, at some point, decided to pull the trigger and start actually trying to get into one of those venture funds to become an investor. I think that when I started, we probably already had something like 30, 35 episodes. The venture ecosystem is a bit weird in that aspect, is that from the outside, it's very much closer. If you're not part of it, you're not part of it. You don't really know what's happening until the day you become part of it. And then you have all of the information. You can see that with fundraising round. If you ask most VCs in climate, they'll be able to give you a list of at least 10 or 15 companies that are currently fundraising in climate tech that everybody knows about. Same for funds that are raising money, which, by the way, the perfect time to join a fund is usually when they've just done their first close, because that's when they unlock the budget to do it. And so that's some information that you only have if you're part of the ecosystem, or just people hiring in the ecosystem or understanding the fund's dynamic. And I think the media aspect gives you a bit of a seat at the table, because you'll know all of a sudden you become a part of the ecosystem, a part that's maybe not as strongly connected, I would say, than VCs and startups, but at least you get to see some of the information that's and some of the things that are happening in the ecosystem. That's when later actually started to find out which funds were opening jobs, and then started to talk to a lot more people. And then serendipity happens at some point, because you just push more and more people towards your own pipeline of funds that you would like to work for, and then you join a fund. But that takes a bit of a journey. And I mean, if we can put it in perspective, I've started the media in November, 2024?
24, yeah.
November 24, and then joined as an investor January 26. So there's a bit of time in between. But that also, I guess, allowed me, looking back at it, to learn a lot and meet a lot of people, which I think is always a great thing.
There's something really relatable here. So I've been part of the climate ecosystem. And so although this podcast is not climate focused, we're going to talk about climate because it is your journey and it's part of mine as well in a certain way. I've been part of the ecosystem since 2020. You said that the media brings you, it's a type of seat at the community, the industry table, let's call it, whatever the industry. I think it's the same in every other industry. But the media seat is not the same one as a founder seat. For example, I've been a founder for 4 years. And although you are in the ecosystem, people know you know some things around you, you hear what we call in French, the bruit de couloir, the corridor sound. So all of the crunchy insights. But the media seat gives you access to certain things that you wouldn't have as a founder. So if you're a founder, there's a bit of that interface between founder and investors only tell founders what they want founders to hear, and founders only tell investors what they want to hear. But when you're in the media seats, you're outside of this and you see the different layers of that pyramid, if we want to put it very simply, of founders, investors, and LPs at the top in a way. And you can see between the different stories. And that gives you insights that no one else has in the industry. You have insights from the founders that founders don't really tell investors. And you have insight from the investors that investors don't really tell founders. And same from LPs. So that's probably one of the things that's the most interesting with the media. And in that sense, I wanted to ask you, we'll talk about the media more later, but just now, what is the one thing that you feel you have a priority access to as a media versus maybe even your role as an investor today that doesn't grant you?
Yeah, and let me react to a few things there. First, on the pyramid, I'm not sure I quite agree with you. I think the people that are making this industry work out, the founders, those are the ones that everything depends on them and on their success. So I'm not sure I would agree on the pyramid, but I think it's more like the capital flow
Sure.
And obviously, capital flows from LPs to GPs to startups. But in terms of, I don't know if the pyramid is the right approach to it, because it seems like it's an order of importance, which I don't think I would agree with you on that.
In a way, you could see that the founders are the foundation layer of that pyramid. I think there's two different ways of reading it. But
fair enough.
I agree with you.
I would say that everyone is on the same table, because we all need to work together to make it work.
For sure.
And to your point, I think the way I've kind of put a pin on it right now in terms of the media seat at the table, it's the only one in this ecosystem that doesn't have a transactional aspect with the rest of the group. So in other words, startups go to investors to ask for money, investors go to LPs to ask for money. media come to everyone and say, just, do you want to get visibility on whatever is it that you're doing? And by the way, I'm not going to ask you to pay for anything. This is just a win-win situation where I want to create more content. You want to get visibility. And then if we'll sit in a room together and have a conversation. That's basically about it. So it's really one where there is no transactional aspect to it, which I think that's why you build a different type of relationship. In terms of the insights that you get as a media that you don't get when you're an investor or startup, I think the thing that it gets you access to is to talk to everyone in this ecosystem, which I think not a lot of people do. Because if you're startups, you have no interest in talking to an LP. That's basically a waste of your time. And by the way, they're likely not to talk to you because they're investing in funds. And same for there's a few layers where people don't talk together, where as a media, you get access to a lot of different people and try to understand their approach. So I think it's more that, I'd say, 360 view of the ecosystem that you get. And for me, that was eye-opening because you'll talk to a GP and they'll say, the LPs are pulling away from climate. And then next week you're talking to an LP and they're like, no, actually we are still investing in climate, but we just have too many different opportunities, or we're too much overexposed to the climate tech landscape, or whatever is it that they're looking for. They're looking for a later stage growth fund, whatever it is, right? But you can somehow match this insight and try to find out what the truth is and what is really happening in the ecosystem, which I think you can't do if you're just an investor, just an LP, just a startup. But you can do if you're a media company. And that's also your role, by the way.
So it allows to give you different point of views. I fully agree with you. So we'll talk about the podcast later because, as I said, it's a bit of a special episode where we're going to go back on the learnings, maybe your first episode, what changed since then, etc. To keep the focus on Climate Club, so the investment syndicates that you're part of. One thing that I've heard a lot recently, especially at the Blue Economy Finance Forum this summer, is, well, aside from LPs are angry because capital is not flowing back, or the power law is broken and the VC world is broken, etc., etc. There is one trend that I've observed, and maybe I have a bias of observation because I believe it's needed, is the operationalization of funds. So funds are becoming more operational, more supportive, putting more hard work. They have to get their hands dirty to get the returns from their investment. It used to be a case of, I give you the cash comes back, that's it. The transaction was in a way very simple. More and more funds are saying, okay, we need to bring more, we need to have additionality. So I want to have your opinion on the usefulness of this additionality, how you observe it being applied by talking to funds and talking to founders. And then personally, with Climate Club, what are you doing to support companies beyond just cash? As in, if I had to pick an investor and I had the incredible luxury of everyone wanting to put money in my company, why would I pick you over the other?
Yeah, and just one small tweak. We're not a syndicate, although we're called Climate Club. We are an investment vehicle, like a normal investment vehicle, except that we have a bit more than 100 people that are LPs with us, or we call them members. Basically, which are all of them entrepreneurs. So, just a bit of context. A traditional fund most of the time has a large institutional investor, like a bank, an insurance company, led public bank, whatever. For us, the strategy was to just bring entrepreneurs across the table, successful entrepreneurs across the table, and invest together in pre-seed and seed climate tech startups. Within those entrepreneurs, by the way, just to name a few, we have the founders of Verkor, one of the largest gigafactory of battery in Europe. We have the founders of BlaBlaCar, Back Market, Criteo, The Fork, like some very, very successful founders. And what we do is that we invest at pre-seed and seed as a follower. So it's a very different role to someone that would go and lead the round. For us, we only invest 100K per company. It's always the same check size. It's you could say quite a small check size, but we come in and as a follower, we take part in the round without leading it. And that allows us to, I guess, be a bit differentiated in the approach, where for us, we say to entrepreneurs that they kind of don't hear from us if they don't need us. because we don't take the lead, because we don't take a board seat, like we are not going to be on their back on the day-to-day basis. However, we tell to all of them from the beginning, you can call us anytime you want. You have access to the full list of our investors. So all of the members that I've just mentioned, these entrepreneurs, very successful entrepreneurs, they have access to the full list. They obviously have access to the list of the portfolio companies that we have, which by now is a bit more than 50 portfolio companies. So there's already a lot of people you can talk to within that community. And then we just also, obviously they have all of our information, so they can call us, WhatsApp us, email us, whatever. And, what we say to entrepreneurs is we think it's very important to have entrepreneurs on your cap table. Like at pre-seed, at least, maybe it's less accurate later on down the line. But when you're very early, it's important to have people you can talk to that understand and have been through the journey, because I don't think you can understand. And that's, frankly speaking, that's a bit of my case, which is like I haven't funded a startup, but all of the other people, the members and the funding partners of Climate Club have, that are people that can understand you, help you, give you advice, and frankly speaking, just either save you time or save you money or help you avoid doing mistakes, right? And eventually both, right? So that's kind of how we work. That's a different, and I think every fund has its own value prop. Some fund will tell you that they can double down on the next round and put more money. Some fund will tell you that they have specific contact within specific corporates that are maybe LPs with them. Some funds will have just a wide network of any other type of value prop. I think for us, it's really first, you get entrepreneurs on your cap table, and with Climate Club, you get one line on your cap table, and you have a bit more than 100 people that are part of this adventure with you that you can call at any time and that will be able to help you. Two, you get the team of Climate Club, so the two funding partners and myself that will be here to help you. And three, you get that community of startups you can talk to as well, because more than 50 portfolio companies in the same kind of horizontal or vertical, whatever you want to call climate tech these days, but at least you get a community of people you can talk to. And the last thing I think we can really help with, and that's, I think it's a bit of our role as an investor in pre-seed, is also help you for the next stage, because you'll likely need to raise money again. And that's also something that, because we have invested in such a large number of companies, now we also have co-invested with such a large number of lead investors that we can introduce you to for the next round. And we've done that very successfully at many times within the portfolio. And I think, again, it comes back to the networks. That's the way we think about it with Climate Club. And then the funny part is that since I've become an investor myself, then we can also bring the media component, which is we can also help give visibility or share information to my community of readers, listeners, and people that are excited about climate tech. So that's kind of the way I see it. Just to go back maybe a bit on your question about like how funds can contribute. I mean, obviously, like I think funds are more great advisors, and I don't know if door openers, if that makes any sense, but like people that can open doors for you and advisors and give you advice. But then in the end, it's the responsibility of the entrepreneur to do whatever it is that they want to do. I think funds will never push too much for it. They're just giving you advice to help you how you can scale and more successfully likely scale the company. And the way I kind of put a pin on it again is just, I think the value of it comes from the speed at which you can solve problem and the access you have to a network that you wouldn't have if you were alone. That's kind of the value prop of Climate Club specifically.
Okay. Makes sense. So it's the whole aspect of we have people who have been there and done that. And so we're saving you time. I of course relate to it a lot because I personally take part as an advisor in different accelerators, the kind of thing that I want to bring forward. When, for example, last week I was at the Mass Challenge in Switzerland. I don't know if you know about it. It's the first accelerator I've been through. And I'm back as a mentor, and I still see companies that are doing, for example, bioplastics, which was my first venture. And I can already tell them, hey, those are the barriers you're going to face. Those are the walls you're going to hit. Let me try to help you in losing less time facing them or not going through them to avoid losing feathers, as we say, and save time, same resources, everything. So very, very relatable thing.
Maybe I can give you a few concrete examples if that helps. But
yeah, that'd be great.
We have, I think, so obviously we have the introduction to potential clients. That's one. That's an obvious one where we have members of the club that have been running or still running companies, and there are some overlaps. So we've done that multiple times. We have had co-investment where some of the members of the club actually decided that they also wanted to take part in the adventure of the company. So just bringing you people from the network. We obviously have helped multiple companies raise their next round and introduce them to the right people. I think that's an obvious value prop. I think for us as well, it has helped us do some technical due diligence, commercial due diligence as well with that network, just like speaking to people that have done that and been there in similar industries, and that really helps you understand the potential of a company. But I have one key example that I really love, and that I think shows to which extent a fund can be, or an investment vehicle like Climate Club can be valuable. There was one company on which we were doing due diligence, and Jeremy, one of the funding partner of Climate Club, did a reference call. So reference call being just like calling someone from the industry, trying to figure out whether or not that's interesting, and which was a good friend of him from the past, from past experiences. After a few discussions, he ended up joining as a co-founder of the company, which I think was quite fantastic, because we went from, okay, let's try to figure out whether or not it's a company that we want to invest in, to actually the person that we were talking to as an expert for that company ended up joining the company as a kind of late co-founder or like co-founder, because it was a very, very early stage company. And, I think that's just going back to the point of like the power of the network. You have multiple angles you can approach it, as customers, as future investors, whatever. But in that case, it was also just someone joining the adventure full time and saying, okay, it's actually what you've just shown me is so good that I just want to join full time, which I think is quite a fantastic story to like the power of the network that you can have as a pre-seed investor in a company.
Plus, for you as investors, if you already know one of the people in the team, especially your co-founder, it's even more of an incentive to invest. You know the person, you know what they're capable of.
I mean, there's no better signal than doing a reference call and the person ends up joining the company. It's just you talk to an expert and they're like, okay, this is so good that I want to join. Obviously,
I want to be there.
Obviously, you want to invest in the company.
For sure. Now, let's begin our transition to the next parts of the podcast. You said it yourself, the podcast also helps with the visibility of Climate Club because, well, not just the visibility of the Climate Club, but the visibility of the companies within Climate Club. You've learned a lot of things through the podcast. You've received guests. I think you have 99 episodes, something like this on Spotify.
Yeah, but by the time this episode is going to release, I think we're going to have passed the 100 episode mark.
Most likely. And will be, I think your episode should be 31, 32, something like this. We're trying to post twice a week, which is an insane amount. But hey, we're doing our work. By the way, are you planning to do because at the moment we're recording this, there's no episode 100 yet. Is there a special episode you're doing for 100?
No special episode yet, but I'm considering doing some sort of like a celebration, maybe an event. Let's see. I don't exactly know what it will look like, but to your point, I think it would be cool to celebrate. I mean, it's a lot of work to put 100 people in the room to have a conversation. On my side, I've been doing it once a week for the last 2 years. I mean, I'm very happy with the number of the episode, although it's just like a very small milestone. I mean, for me, it's like, I know I'm going to do this for the next 10 years. So it's just a small milestone in the journey.
If you think it's a lot of work to put them in the same room with you at once, try putting them in the same room physically. And 100 of them doing an event is nightmare. Anyways, good luck with that. So with those learnings, now that you're working as an investor, would you be able to say maybe one or two learnings from the episodes, from the podcast, things you heard from the different investors that you brought in your career as an investor yourself, things that you heard and thought, I'm going to use that maybe in my next due diligence or something like this?
Wow. Yes, there are many episodes that I can relate to specifically now as an investor. I think one of the early episodes that I had was with Tim Schumacher, who's a general partner of World Fund, one of the largest climate tech fund in Europe. It's a 300 million plus fund that they're operating from Germany. And they're doing somehow like a seed to later stage. I mean, says A, B type of thing. And Tim had a very good framing that I think almost became their non-official mantra at World Fund, which is we only invest in companies that can sell to climate deniers. And if you let that sit for a second, what this sentence is telling you is, in order for a climate tech company to be successful, it has to have a value proposition that goes much beyond sustainability and reducing CO2 emissions, whatever. It has to basically be able to stand on its own 2 feet. And I think this framing of saying it can sell to climate deniers basically means if you get into a room with a customer, you pitch them everything apart from you pitch everything apart from the climate tech component of it. So like the reduction of CO2 emissions, the savings on energies or whatever. You just pitch them your product. Will they buy it from you? And even going further than that, if they are climate deniers, meaning they don't even believe in climate change, which, arguably, if they are, I don't know what they're doing at a higher position in a customer, but whatever, really tells you that if you can do that, you can really pinpoint to a company that has a very strong value proposition. And I think that's on the back of a long old belief earlier in the climate tech journey where people wanted to sell product that had the same performance, etc., but had a higher price because they were greener, which we later called the green premium, the fact that people would pay more money for the same service if it was greener, so more sustainable. And I think that's something that doesn't hold true in this world. I think, unfortunately, you have to play the rule of capitalism in order to decarbonize the planet, which means providing a better service, more performance, lower price, more resilience, whatever is it that you're pitching to your customer, and then sustainability coming last. And that relates to a few other episodes that have the same logic. There's someone from a fund called ENU in Germany, again, Fabian Ehlmann was the general partner there, which also a very good entrepreneur, has built, sold one company to Google and built a unicorn after that. And he said, if you ask for a green premium in 2026, go home. And that's a very tough way of putting it, but I think it's also a great way to put it together. And then the last one that I would come back to on that specific logic of whether or not your climate tech company can stand on its own 2 feet is conversation I had with Yair Rim from Extensia, who has a very specific graph that I can send you later, which says basically how the industry wants you to pitch and how climate tech startup wants to pitch. Basically, it's a reverse. So climate tech startup would want to pitch as sustainability first, resilience second, performance third, price fourth. And Yair flipped it for the industry. It's the other way around. It's like price, performance, resilience, and then sustainability at last. And I think these are great framing. So that's one of the learning. It's really like how can a company can stand on its own 2 feet. There's another one from a very recent episode that I actually loved, which was with Clara from Transition. And Clara has gone on a trip to China and she's been an investor in deep tech company for the last few years. And she kind of told me you can build hardware deep tech as fast as software. There's no physical element that stops you from doing it. And I think that's very much accurate when you look at companies that are coming, or founders that are coming out of SpaceX or Tesla or this very fast scaling deep tech company. Well, they can move really fast. And, I had this interview with someone from Toralf Gutierrez from Sirona Technologies, which is a direct air capture company. Toralf has spent the beginning of his career, I think 7 or 8 years at Tesla. And he's iterating super fast, even if it's a product that's direct air capture, very much physical, very much hardware, deep tech, they've been able to times and times again, I think in 3 years, iterate 6 or 7 times on the product, which, there's no physical limit to the speed at which you can go. And I think that's also a great learning, which is you shouldn't limit your ambition just because you're doing hardware deep tech, which is, the case of a lot of climate tech companies.
Yeah.
Kind of 2 key learning. And then the rest, obviously, with a podcast, the thing you learn is interviewing people, trying to double down on a specific point of view, asking questions. You also have the building a network kind of dynamic where you speak to a lot of people that you can rely on later. And even just interviewing great founders, later in the journey, Series A, B, C, people that have gone through the early journey of the story shows you what a great founders would look like. And as an investor, because it's basically pattern recognition that you're doing all the time, trying to match what you've seen working with new people that are coming in, while seeing what great looks like very early on is it's critical. You have to see it, and the podcast allow you to sit in a room with someone that has been partly successful at least, or on the way to success.
I see. I can't agree more with the whole sustainability versus performance. Sustainability, we've said it many times on this podcast as well, means to sustain yourself in time. And it happens that we are in a capitalistic world, for the better or for the worse. We're not talking about philosophy here. But if you want to sustain yourself in time, you need cash. And if you don't get to scale, if you don't have a good product, if you're not a good business, you don't make cash and you just die. So, and I've been repeating this again at the Mass Challenge, for example, last week. And to all sustainable companies, you are not sustainable startups. You are great businesses that happen to be building a product that has an impact on sustainability. Like that's what you need to be. You need to have a sturdy business. That's the first thing. So really happy that we can add another layer on that toast, another layer of good business over sustainability, the green premium. I mean, I worked in, especially when you go to the commodity where margins are. So price, performance, and then if it happens to be sustainable, good, you're on the right path. But
I think you
it needs
can
to be
also
embedded in what you do, but you can't neglect the other ones. That's what I mean.
100%. But I think, I mean, price is important, but you can also have different way of selling a solution. It doesn't have to be only the price, but it could also be the performance, could be the resilience, could be the supply chain, could be whatever is it that you're selling. But it has to be able to convince someone that doesn't care about the climate tech impact that they have.
It needs to be better.
Exactly.
A better solution, of course.
Like any other product, really.
Yeah, exactly. It shouldn't be, we're in the sustainability space, hence we operate within a different framework. No, you're the same framework, the same as everyone else. Anyways, all right. So I'm really glad we covered the investment part. Now we're going to go to the second part of the podcast, our signature format, if you want, the very quick rapid fire questions. We're going to start with this or that. For lack of a better title, after 30 episodes, it's still called like this. I'm going to give you an option A and option B. You pick one. Don't need to justify it because we'll have a couple minutes after to do this. And then we'll run the exact same thing with yes or no. Again, horrible title, but at least it's very clear. And that's what matters. So
sure,
if you're ready, all right, let's go.
That's scary though.
No pressure. And by the way, if you don't want to answer, or if you want to say both or none, you can. Okay. It's not considered cheating. Don't worry. So, all right, let's go. As an investor, do you care more about the founder's storytelling or the market size?
I'd say not storytelling, but I would say I care more about the founders.
Right. Do you prefer a warm introduction or a cold application?
Warm introduction, obviously.
Do you feel more like a media or like an investor?
An investor that uses media as a tool.
Right. Do you feel like founders are more honest on the podcast or investors?
Founders.
What do you think is more valuable? What you learn from investors or what you learn from founders on the podcast?
It's different.
We'll talk about this, Ori. That's why we have the discussion bit right after. Which episode usually makes for better, more insightful content? An episode with an investor or a founder?
It's different.
And which ones are the ones that you prefer recording?
I would say if you sit in a room with a founder that really has a vision for their product and what they want to do, that's usually a very exciting moment and very exciting conversation because you can see the passion. So likely in founders. Okay.
Hardware or software at pre-seed and climate? What's a better investment?
Both.
And the one that you prefer doing?
Both.
Okay. EU or US for climate tech in 2026?
EU.
Podcast host or investor, which one taught you more?
Investor.
That's the first one. Deep breath. A lot of both answers, which is good because, I'm hesitating to turn this into more of a strict, you have to answer one or the other. So it becomes a bit more polarizing, but I think the discussion is also quite interesting. So you said founders more honest on the podcast than investors. I believe it's just the nature of a founder, especially the passion pushes that. And I don't want it to be doing any kind of shaming. So more valuable between the investor learnings and the founder learnings. You said it's kind of different. What is different in there? What are the things you learn from a founder that you don't learn from an investor, and the things you learn from an investor that you don't learn from a founder?
Yeah, I would almost split it in two different categories of episode because the investor usually, well, first of all, on the investment side, you learn more with investors in terms of like how to think about investing in a company, how to build a conviction, how to think about market size, and how to think about the right team. So it's the same coin but a different side, so to say.
Gotcha.
But I would say the thing that you learn more from founders is, well, first company building, going from a vision to a product to something that's financed by an investor that's growing and everything. But also, I think you get to a different level of depth when it comes to market and product and technology. And that I think is just the nature of it. I feel like I'm being Mr. Obvious here because investors by default are generalists. Yeah. No matter how specific they are on their thesis, right? Like even if you're a climate tech investor, even if you had an episode with someone that's doing only geothermal investment, they have very, very strong knowledge of geothermal. But a founder has dedicated 10 years of their life to
Yes,
one
of course.
specific technology in one specific market with one specific angle. So like they can go much deeper, but that's just that's being very obvious.
I feel like climate as well is like the worst example because it's so broad. Like
Yes.
you can do climate in any kind of industry.
Yes.
But yeah, the investor, in a way, it's a bit of a more holistic, pedagogical approach because it considers every aspect of the investment. Whereas the
Yes.
founder, you can go a bit more in depth. Fully agree with you. I asked you about hardware and software, and I thought until you said it just now in the first part that hardware was a lot harder than software to develop. You mentioned that some deep tech companies can develop very, very fast, but there is still an immovable barrier, which is capital requirements. If you're doing hardware, it's not the same as doing software in terms of development speed. Could you develop a little bit about this and what makes for you hardware and software as good and as equal of bets for an investor despite the seemingly different exit timelines?
It's interesting because I actually had on the latest episode of the podcast, Clara from Transition told me that she told me that basically if you look at how much cash a company, equity cash, I mean, a hardware company needs versus a software company to get to a certain milestone of revenue, it's just the timeline is different as to when you have to invest the cash, but in the end, it was quite similar. So in other words, hardware deep tech company needs maybe a bit more cash at the beginning and less later. I'm talking only equity because for hardware deep tech, you have a lot of other type of financing.
Grants, etc.
Grants, debts, infrastructure fund that are coming for SPVs specifically. Like you have a lot of different stuff you can do, but that was an interesting observation. I would have to look up the report specifically just to understand more specifically what she meant. But I think that was an interesting point. The way I look at it between hardware, deep tech, and software is just a different type of risk. On one side, software, first of all, today is becoming less and less defensible unless you have a software applied to a specific hardware. I mean, everybody can go on cloud and vibe code something. I mean, not saying that you can vibe code everything and that you don't need engineer to build a company, but like the defensibility of software has gone down by like an immense amount, right? But on the other side, you can get quicker to market, you can get quicker to revenue, but it's probably going to be more competitive because more people will be able to go after the same logic. I think the combination of software and hardware, where you apply software to a specific hardware component, becomes interesting, or where you have access to specific data point that other people don't have access to, because that's where you kind of have a lock-in effect, where you can say, okay, well, I'm doing software, I don't know, let's call it for EV chargers, and then you have specific lock-in effect with the EV charger because you're the only one that can manage it. The only one that can operate it. You have exclusivity on its data, whatever that is. I think that makes it interesting, but like pure software is becoming more and more difficult. And to be honest, frankly speaking, often in climate tech, you have a combination of those two. And then hardware, I think the difference is like often what we look for is we don't want to take market risk and tech risk at the same time. And that I think is a very simple framing that can help you decide what to do with an investment, which is on hardware deep tech. The question is, will the product work? Like, can you build it and will it work? And will the price will be as low as you're claiming it to be? The thing is, if that happens, are you 100% sure that people will be buying from you? If that's the case, then you only have a tech risk. And then it's up to you to decide whether or not it's the right team to build it, but that they have the credentials, but that they have the background, the IP, whatever. Whereas I see software with more of a market risk. Like I know they'll be able to build the software. The question is, will the
there
market
be adoption?
Exactly, right. So it's a bit of a different risk. Timeline are different. Capital requirement is different as well. But I don't think one is better to the other, to be honest.
I see. I think that's it for this part. The other ones, when you said both, it's very obvious why you said both. EU or US for climate tech, you said EU. That's something that we have somewhat developed in other episodes as well. So
I mean, I can give you a few words.
Maybe just a TLDR on why you also agree with this, because it seems to be a recurring thing. Just maybe 2 or 3 words on why you think that.
TLDRs is top universities and talent, great regulatory framework that's stable in time. You have great investor and money for hardware deep tech. So I think that ecosystem makes it viable. And the last thing, to be honest, when I think about climate tech specifically, is Europe doesn't have any oil and gas under its feet. So we have to find other solutions if we want to be independent from other countries. And those solutions have to be green. Like there's no other choice, really. So that encourages people to look at geothermal, fusion, whatever that is that we are looking at in terms of technology. Whereas our friends in the US still have oil and gas that they can rely on, and they have a less stable regulatory framework. Maybe it's a bit easier to get financing there, but we also have, I say, like some of the best research in the world. That's the TLDR.
The push brings the pull, which isn't the case everywhere else. In that case, we can run to the next fast set of questions. You saw how it happened in the first one, so now you're not in the complete unknown anymore. And this one's going to be a bit shorter as well. So deep breath, and here we go. All right. Have you ever had a guest that said something on the podcast that completely changed your mind about investing?
Yes.
Do you think VCs reveal more in a podcast than they would in a pitch meeting or in a founder meeting?
Yes.
Has hosting the New Wave podcast ever directly surfaced a deal for a climate club?
Yes.
Is there a topic you've tried to get answered across 90 plus episodes and you still haven't got the answer?
Yes.
Do you think founders explain fundraising better than investors do?
It's different.
All right. Is there a taboo question in the climate VC that nobody answers honestly on the record?
Yes.
Do you think the podcast made you a better investor?
I hope.
And I'm going to put the flip question as well, which I didn't plan, but do you think being an investor also helps you on the podcast?
100%.
And finally, are you having a good time on the show?
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right. Let's go into this thing. I
said yes to everything.
Maybe the questions were a little bit oriented, but it gives us very great material to discuss about. We had the first part was very yes and no, this and that, and then we got to discuss. And here we're going to justify the yeses. Let's say the guests that told you something that really changed everything about your vision on the podcast. If you had to bring it down to one episode that maybe we'll put in the description that you want the people who listen to this episode to go and check out, what would be that one episode? Maybe not really you're the most proud of, but the one that really brought you the most critical, crucial information.
So if you're going to put it in the description, I'm going to change so I said, team from World Fund. We only invest in companies that can sell to climate deniers. Really works well. It was the beginning of the podcast. So my question and my ability to run the podcast was maybe less good, but more recent episode, I would say Fabian from ANU. If you ask for green premium, go home. And then there is a full discussion on why that's the case. I think that completely changes the way you should think about climate tech investment. Or at least it doesn't change my perspective because that's the one that I came from, but like at least reinforce something that's very important for this community.
It solidifies, it crystallizes it. Yeah. I don't know if you're allowed to say this. You said that it has helped. New Wave has helped surfacing certain deals with Climate Club. Do you have any specific example?
Yeah, I mean, so quite often actually when we reach out to founders or have a conversation, we receive like, oh, by the way, I'm also like following the podcast as the work you do. And I think that really helps us get into conversation. But I can, to be honest, on my side specifically, I can track most of my investments to a conversation, a connection, or whatever that is from New Wave. Be it a co-investor, a lead investor that brings us a deal, a follower that brings us a deal, a founder that I've talked to that introduced me to someone. Like I can really track most of my investment.
So it's a recurring thing.
It's a recurring thing, but it's nice. More also because at some point you're being flagged as I said earlier, I like this framing, which is like the hype man for climate tech. Like I'm just trying to push the positive narrative, and so people like are often aware of that. More specifically, has it helped us? Like, is there a deal that came from a DM on LinkedIn or like someone reacting to the podcast? I don't think I have exactly tracked that yet, but I said like most conversations I had, people were either aware of or had heard about the podcast.
Gotcha. And then we talked about the investor versus founder explanation, or which one talks about fundraising, explains it in a better way. I believe you were okay to say it was the founders. My hypothesis behind writing this question is that the founder has been through it, and that's what allows him to describe it in greater details. Is that something that you agree with, basically?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's two sides of the same coin, obviously. So investors will be able to explain the process from their perspective, which is how they go about an investment, how they build their conviction, how they take it to their partners, how they discuss it together, how they do reference calls, whatever is it that they do. The thing I would say that if I were a founder, I would listen rather to founders than investors is because they've gone through what it feels like on the other side. I can pinpoint to this episode with Fabien from Genomics. Fabien has raised a very successful Series A in Europe with Forbion and the engine from MIT. The seed round or the pre-seed, I can't remember, was led by Lower Carbon Capital. So really,
Didn't
really
they raise from Eurazeo as well?
eventually, I have to look it up. I'm not sure. You have to
Can't
look it up
remember.
because there was a lot of people around the table for this round.
Yeah.
There was Wind, there was Teampact. I mean, there's a few others. Really, like when you listen and talk to Fabien, he'll explain you how it was super hard to raise the first round. Like, and he talked to so many people. It didn't work out. He was, tired, exhausted by the process, and it took a very long time. And then Lower Carbon came in and took the first round. And then same again for the next round. Very high ambition. European company wanting to raise 40 million as a Series A. Like very difficult period of time for Fabien personally as well, and how he lives through it. But then it came together into a very, very nice round. So like, he's going to be able to tell you the emotional part, which I think the funds are not going to be able to tell you because they don't live it the same way. And the emotional part, I think, is not to be neglected because it takes a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, it's stressful, and it's basically the life of your company depends on it. Not your life, but the life of your company depends on it, right? Like if you can't raise money for some of the startups, I mean, Fabien at Genomics wants to extract nickel from the ground using plants. Like you need so much R&D. You need to you'll need to go across the world to install these plants and run them. Like it's gonna need cash. So if he didn't raise money, he wouldn't be there today likely. And so I think that's kind of like the emotional part is something that you feel with founders that you don't feel with founders.
I mean, I can relate. When we were raising our seed round back with Lexi, at some point we had to plug in 10 grand of our own pockets in the company, and we stopped paying ourselves salary because we were just waiting for the term sheets to come in and stuff like this. And comes a point where you nearly accept that, okay, it's over. Like we're not going to make it. And then you manage to get your head above the water. And I mean, I'm not afraid of saying it, but there was a time where I had to go see a trichologist. This is the doctor for the hair because I was starting to lose my hair like proper bad. And it was telling me, no, you're not balding. It's just stress. It's pure stress. And yeah, that's where the whole work-life balance becomes even more important. A lot of founders put this aside. They feel like emotions is part of it. You're going to cry. You're going to have your sleepless nights, etc. But if you're not in a good physical, mental state, you can get all the funding in the world. It's going to kill you. So yeah, that's a bit of advertising or whatever, but it is important to consider the mental aspect. I feel like we're getting to the end of this, and the whole episode has progressed, and we're getting to the culmination, which is that specific taboo question, the thing that you had 99 episodes, and maybe you try to ask it sometimes directly, sometimes you insinuate it, and you don't get the answer to certain things. What are those things? Tell us, Hugo. You can lash out. This is a safe place. What are those things that you ask either founders or investors? I believe it's going to be on the investor side that you just could not get the answer to, either because you don't get the full story and there's a lack of transparency, or because no one has the answer maybe. But what are those things that maybe frustrates you? I know frustrating is a hard word, but the one thing that you wish you could get the answer to that, and that would be like a massive tick on your tick box as a media.
I mean, I think frustrating is actually the right word to use. And maybe it's stating the obvious, I don't know. But like the one thing that I can't really get to is performance of the funds. Which I wish like everybody had their performance wide open to everyone else, and everybody, like, think about it. Like if you're an LP, it's very rarely that you can come up with like a table that has all of the list of the funds with their performance across the different vintages and how it evolves over time. And the reason why I think it's important is not that I'm greedy for money or whatever, or like I want to just look at who's the best fund, because I don't think that the performance alone would help you get there. But it's rather to say, hey, look, like we as a climate tech ecosystem, we need to show performance in order to convince people that what we're doing is not just for the greatness of the world and making it better and more sustainable, but also that this is making money. We have to show the narrative to LPs that invest their money based on financial requirement, that climate tech in venture capital is a good asset class, is a good horizontal, vertical, whatever you want to call it, but it's a good way to invest your money. I mean, obviously, I understand that most of the funds have requirement not to disclose their performance, and really, I'm not really sure what would happen if they would, to be honest. And I've gotten close to it at times when I've talked to LPs that would disclose performance at a very high level across vintages for certain funds type, whatever. But like, I wish I could ask every single fund on the podcast, hey, like, tell me, like, where do you stand today? It's your first vintage. Okay, what's your TVPI? How much money have you gotten back to LPs? Like, do you think you'll return more than 1x? Do you think you'll return more than 2x? What are your winners in the portfolio? How much have they raised by now? Like, what's the performance on that for you as a pre-seed investor? What does that mean when you have, 40 or 50 million Series A round when you're a pre-seed investor in that company? And I think that level of transparency would really help the ecosystem, but it would also mean that everybody has to, there's this funny way of saying it in French, which is like when the sea comes back, we'll see who was swimming naked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and so that's a bit of the thing. Like if you want to talk about performance and then show everybody else, like, okay, what's really happening in the ecosystem? Well, eventually you'll see that some people are performing less well than you would have thought from the outside.
Absolutely.
But that's a one thing that I think is a bit frustrating, because I really, really, really think it would help the ecosystem if more people knew, specifically in climate tech, where I'm sure we have funds that have great performance, so they should be proud about it and share it to the world.
Is it? So I actually have two follow-up questions. The first one is, do you feel like it's unfair because in one way, startups have to be transparent? I mean, if they want to get capital, they have to state, hey, are we performing well? And all those kind of metrics that they're not the same, the metrics of a company and the ones of a VC, but in a way they are, in the sense that you have to show performance, you have to show numbers. The whole part of de-risking, due diligence, and fundraising is, hey, this is where I'm at, and this is what is supposed to provide trust and confidence to invest money in my company. So why wouldn't the VCs do it? I mean, they do it on a one-to-one basis from them to the LP. So maybe the LPs are the one who hold that truth, and they're told to not tell it to anyone else. But
companies as well want to keep it secret. I mean, not secret, but like on valuation most of the time.
Yes, there's a certain amount that they want to say in public, like, hey, we're at this point, we're making that much revenue, but there's certain things that they don't want to say. Whereas VC tends to be more close. So do you feel like it's more unfair to LPs or more unfair to founders that VCs don't really reveal those kind of metrics?
Well, I don't know. I just think it's a standard practice in this industry that has always been like that, and funds have not been public about their performance in the past. And I mean, look, there's multiple layers of it. Like, you would have to have companies be willing to share their exact valuation, which means that, depending on the country, you would be able to know how much a certain person is worth based on their ownership in the company. And it offers a much wider, I guess, problem about money in general. But in the end, I'd love for everybody to know, like, okay, how much is the valuation of a certain company, how much is the ownership of a fund in that company, what does the result look like, which LPs, because in the end I think it would help more people do the smart choices and invest. And I think for climate tech specifically, we need this ecosystem to perform as good as possible, to return as much money as possible to LPs, so that more money comes back and then we attract more LPs. And
the cycle, yeah,
it's a cycle, right? So that's a way to think about it. But I mean, and then frankly speaking, since I'm an investor now, I'm also thinking about it a bit differently, which is, yes, I understand why I wouldn't be able to communicate on performance on my side as well. Because, like, I mean, specifically for us, for example, I can give you the example. We have invested in 50 companies. It's very early days. So we started the vehicle 2.5 years ago. And so all of those things are moving all the time. A company will raise the next round. It's going to increase your performance. A company is going to go bankrupt. It's going to decrease. So, like, it's very hard right now to say, where that's going to land.
Yeah.
And then to pinpoint a specific number, which might change tomorrow if a company closes their round. So I would understand why, but I think we could be at least more public on funds that have been closed, like completely closed.
Yeah.
Money
they're past
is
the 10 years.
They're past the 10 years mark.
Gotcha.
For this one, we could talk about it.
Just one thing, is that mainly a problem in climate? And because you talk with the funds that are not only climate, I mean, to take some of my personal investors back in the days, Indico Capital doesn't only invest in ocean. They also have other investments. So is that transparency thing an issue with other industries as well? Or is it just a climate thing? I feel like it's everywhere.
I think it's everywhere. Yeah. I mean, unless like some of the That's always a funny thing. The very, very successful people will tell you, like, what's this fund? Was it like the first law of carbon capital? I think was called differently. That has, before they invested in climate, they were investing in tech, and they had an investment in Twitter and whatever else. And like the performance like skyrocket, like 200x the fund, something like that. But but they talk about it because yes, it looks great.
Because they can.
Right.
Let me bring maybe this as a final question, because I'm time conscious for you. And I want to bring the flip side of this all and throw a little pebble in the cogs. If all of those numbers were more public and became the reason to invest, or would contribute a lot more to be the reason to invest, wouldn't you think that this would prevent some funds that are early stage funds, maybe new funds, from raising? Because people would all go to see, hey, I'm going to go on whatever the website is called. Like, I'm going to go on a website that references all of the performance of VCs. And well, my obvious guess as an LP, I don't want to take too much time doing my DD. I put my money in the one that performs the best. And you kind of enter that YC kind of loop where I invest in the YC company. I don't really need to check what they're doing. I just invest because it's YC, and it removes capital from those who are just getting started because they don't have those metrics to show, and they can't go out there and say, hey, I will work well as well, but I just don't have the numbers to show you. And it's sort of the pre-seed paradox of companies that don't really have much traction to show you. What do you think would be that impact?
No, I don't think so, because I think it's so LPs have access to that information anyway. Like the thing is like it's not being published. It's not public today. But if you're an LP, you ask any fund, they'll give you the exact performance. They have to anyway. So those guys know that if they want to have a safe bet that has relatively good performance on average across all vintage, they're going to go to the Sequoia and to the A16Z and to the whatever index or whatever else that is in Europe, or Seedcamp, or and then, by the way, I'm not saying no one's publishing the performance. If you look at Seedcamp, I believe they are publishing their performance on all of the vintages that are closed by now. So LPs have that information already. I don't think the rationale for an LP investing in an emerging manager, which, by the way, emerging managers often have a best performance than long-term funds. Like on average, the extremely great performance are done by first-time managers on their first vintage. But I don't think that would change that rationale, because they have access already. It's more of they want to finance something that's different. They want to also diversify a little bit, maybe have something that has a bit of a different thesis. But capital is already quite concentrated anyway. Look at how much capital is invested in the top 3 or 4 funds in the US versus the total venture market. You will see that those people get probably like 80% of all of the capital that's in venture into like Sequoia, A16Z, and all of the big ones.
So where would it help? If you're saying it wouldn't make that much of a difference, then where would it actually have a difference?
I think What I think it would help is just like to show more transparency, even for founders, to be honest. Like, like choose your investor, choose the one that has a great performance or that has a great track record. And I mean, people are already doing that and looking at the companies in the portfolio, but you don't really know which one is performing well. And I think just more transparency helps in this ecosystem. As I was telling you, coming full circle at the end of this episode, when I wanted to join venture, it felt like a very closed ecosystem where information was not shared. Well, if more information was shared outside, it would be a bit more open and a bit more easy to understand from the outside. And I think performance is a big part of it.
And it would help breaking that kind of pyramid that I unfortunately said at the start. But as a founder, or as an ex-founder myself, it does feel like a pyramid, unfortunately, because of that lack of transparency between layers. Hugo, I'm so thankful for the opportunity you gave us to expand on all of those topics. Maybe closing remarks, either, I don't know, last word you want to give to investors, founders, or any topic that you're particularly interested in, anyone you want to have on the show. I don't know, what are you, the floor is open. You can say anything you want now.
So there's couple of things. The first thing is I want to remind everyone that what we're doing in climate tech, first of all, is redesigning all of the industrial systems that have been built, but in a more sustainable way, which means that we are basically building the future of what the world will look like. And that future, or building that future, is quite profitable and you can make money with it. That's the first thing. The second thing is the reason why we're doing it is not to save the planet, which, by the way, doesn't mean anything. The reason why we're doing it is to build a world where, as a species, as a human species, we can live on this planet. And I think it's a great time to talk about it, where Europe is in a very high heat wave all across Europe and people are very struggling with the heat. Like, the reminder is, We're not doing this for the planet specifically, although it's great to preserve it. But the reason why we want to preserve it is also very selfish, is that humans can live on it. So like
It's resilience.
It's a resilience, right? And that's the mission. The mission is not to say, hey, like it's good because YX reason of like we want to save whatever plants. And the reason why we want to save those plants is because this ecosystem, the way it's built today, works really well for us as a human species to live on. If we're going to destroy all of that, the first thing that's going to leave this planet is human beings. So that's the next thing. And then the last thing I want to say is like if you're a founder in climate tech, just reach out. We are open for investments at pre-seed and seed. My email is hugo@climateclub.cc. And so yeah, if you want to reach out, you know where to find me, or on LinkedIn, but I think email is going to be better.
Beautiful. I think that's about it, Hugo. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to hearing the 100th episode of New Wave. And of course, we'll put all of the credentials of Hugo, of Climate Club, of New Wave. Everything will be in the descriptions. If you are only listening to this and you want to see our beautiful faces, especially Hugo's because he has a much better setup than I do, you can also check this on YouTube. For all of the content to be accessible in a more digestible format, we're also going to publish clips. So check our Instagram and YouTube for the shorter formats. And for all of the learnings, they will all be in the repository on the Fundraising Insiders website. God, I'm struggling. But this is where you have all of the learnings in one place. If you just want to learn about, what makes your how to build your team, you just type team, boom, you'll have all the timestamps and all of the episodes with all of the guests who talked about that specific thing. So you can head over there. Hopefully by the time this comes out, I'll be done coding this thing so it's good and live. Hugo, thank you so much again. And I'm sure we'll be in touch for many other things, especially on the climate side. And if you do that event in person to celebrate, I do want to call dibs on a ticket.
Thanks for having me, Thibaut.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.